You touch your own face right now without thinking about it. Your skin, your nose, the soft tissue underneath. You assume it will simply be gone one day. But one civilization built its entire worldview around refusing to accept that. And the way they refused is far stranger and far more disturbing than most people realize. Ancient Egypt did not mummify bodies to preserve memory. It mummified bodies because it believed the body was a machine the soul needed to keep functioning forever. Lose the machine, and the soul had nowhere to return to. That single belief created one of the most elaborate and most gruesome technical industries the ancient world ever produced. Start with the brain. Egyptian embalmers did not think it mattered. Not because they were ignorant, but because they believed the heart was the seat of intelligence and emotion. The brain was just packing material, so they removed it. Not gently. A long bronze hook was inserted through the nostril into the skull and used to whisk the brain into liquid so it could drain out or be scooped free in pieces. Did that sound almost too simple to be true? It wasn't simple at all. Egyptologist Bob Breyer, one of the few modern researchers to actually reconstruct the entire mummification process using ancient tools and a real donated human body, confirmed just how physically demanding this step was. It took strength, precision, and repeated insertions to fully clear the skull. The heart, meanwhile, was left in place, deliberately. It would later be weighed against a feather in the afterlife, and Egyptians needed it exactly where it belonged. The organs came next: liver, lungs, stomach, intestines, all removed through a cut along the left side of the abdomen, all treated separately, all dried and packed away, often in canopic jars guarded by the four sons of Horus. Each organ had its own protector. Each organ mattered enough to be preserved individually, wrapped, and sometimes even mummified on its own before burial. Now here's where it gets stranger. The body cavity, now empty, was packed, not with anything modern embalmers would use. Linen, sawdust, sometimes resin-soaked cloth, sometimes even onions was stuffed inside to help the body hold its shape as it dried. Salima Ikram, one of the leading Egyptologists studying mummification techniques at the American University in Cairo, has spent decades analyzing exactly what materials were used and why, and her research shows the recipe changed constantly depending on the era, the wealth of the family, and what the embalmers had access to. The entire body was then covered, inside and out, in natron, a naturally occurring salt found near dry lake beds in Egypt. It pulled every trace of moisture from the tissue over roughly 40 days. 40 days of a corpse sitting, drying, shrinking, while priests performed rituals around it. This wasn't a quiet, sanitized process. It was physical, chemical, and slow. The skin would have darkened. The body would have lost close to 75% of its original weight. Why go through all of this? Because the Egyptians believed something most people today would find almost unbearable to sit with, that death was not an ending, it was a transition requiring your actual physical body to survive the trip. Once dried, the body was anointed with oils and resins, partly for ritual purposes, partly because those substances have antibacterial properties that helped preserve the tissue even further. Then came the wrapping. Hundreds of yards of linen wound layer after layer, sometimes with amulets tucked between the folds, a scarab over the heart, protective symbols along the limbs. Every wrap had meaning. Every wrap took time. A single high-status mummification could take the full 70 days, start to finish, before burial. Here is the part that unsettles most people the first time they hear it. This was not reserved for royalty alone. Wealthy Egyptians, priests, officials, and eventually even middle-class citizens sought some version of mummification. Cheaper versions existed too, using less elaborate methods, sometimes skipping organ removal entirely and instead using cedar oil enemas to dissolve internal tissue before it was drained out through the body's own openings. Herodotus, the Greek historian who traveled through Egypt and wrote about what he witnessed, described multiple tiers of mummification, from the most expensive down to what was essentially budget preservation for people who couldn't afford anything more. Think about that for a moment. An ancient economy built around death, embalmers who specialized, workshops that competed on price and quality, a funeral industry in the truest sense thousands of years before the modern one existed. And it wasn't only humans. Cats, ibises, crocodiles, even beetles were mummified by the millions as offerings to gods. Researchers using CT scanning technology, including work led by Rosalie David at the University of Manchester's K&H Centre for Biomedical Egyptology, have found that a significant number of animal mummies contained no actual animal remains at all. Empty wrappings, bundled straw, sold to pilgrims who couldn't tell the difference and who likely never expected to check. That detail changes the picture, doesn't it? Mummification wasn't only sacred devotion, it was also, at times, a business willing to cut corners. So why does any of this still matter to you, thousands of years later, scrolling through a screen in a world where death is hidden behind hospital walls and quiet paperwork? Because the instinct underneath it hasn't gone anywhere. You still want to believe something continues. You still build rituals around loss, even if they look nothing like natron and linen. A funeral, a gravestone, a photograph kept in a wallet. Different tools, same fear, same refusal to let a body simply disappear without meaning. Modern science has only made the ancient obsession feel almost prescient. CT scans of mummies like Tutankhamun's have revealed old injuries, possible causes of death, even diet and disease patterns, all preserved in tissue that was never meant to be examined by strangers 3,000 years later. The Egyptians were trying to protect the body from time. In a strange, unintended way, they also protected information. Information researchers are still decoding today. There's something almost uncomfortable about that irony. A civilization terrified of being forgotten accidentally built one of history's most detailed physical records of how people actually lived, ate, got sick, and died. Not because they wanted future strangers to study them, because they wanted to survive death itself, literally, body intact, soul returning home. You will never see your own face the way they saw theirs, not as something temporary to be mourned once then let go, but as a vessel worth fighting to keep, even against decay itself, even against 40 days of salt and silence. And maybe that's the real disturbing truth, not the hooks or the missing brains or the organs sealed in jars. It's the fear driving all of it is still sitting quietly inside you right now, in the moment you touched your own face and assumed, without thinking, that one day it simply wouldn't be there anymore.